Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another round of Basis Picks. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, as an associate, an enemy, any and all in between. It is much appreciated. We're moving, 12th day of the year, special day. With that being said, we're not going to go into all of that. As I say before, if you know, you know. Get down in the comment section, you know what to do. Otherwise, look, there's one card on this weekend giving us all the talking points, and it's all about Artur Beterbiev against Callum Smith. Now, there's 3 fights on that card that I'm actually interested in, but the problem is 2 of the fights I don't know enough about the opponents to be able to give comprehensive breakdowns. So what I've figured I'd do, let me just speak about those 2 fights quickly now, and then we'll go into the main event sort of next. So obviously this fight's taking place in the Centre Videotron in Quebec, Canada. I did actually want to try and get out there for that, but plans didn't quite work out that way, unfortunately. But I heard it's like -20 over there, so maybe it was lucky that I didn't get the opportunity to go. That being said, first fight I want to talk about is Jason Maloney against Saul Sanchez. Now, I've not seen enough of Saul Sanchez to know what type of levels he poses. I've heard his name a couple of times, but never seen any of his fights. So I had a quick look on his box rec and did actually notice that he had a fight with Jericho O'Quinn back in 2020, I think, and he actually knocked him out in the first round. Now, that's obviously very significant because Jericho recently knocked out one of our guys. What was that? Was that the 5th round of that fight? Yeah, I think it was the 5th round. And yeah, it was a fight that everything came from the, but against the run of play, and he all of a sudden put himself into sort of the public eye. So I guess that was definitely a victory that aged well on Sanchez's record. I haven't really seen much of the others, but there wasn't really many other guys of note on there. But when you look at Jason Maloney, his last victory was against Vincent Astrolabio. He's got other pretty credible wins on his record. He's a very sort of tough Australian. Already been champion. I think he's a 2-weight champion if I'm correct. But obviously he's now vying. I think he's vying for I think it's a vacant title he's vying for. No, I think the Astrolabio fight was the vacant title. So yeah, so he's actually just defending his title in this one. All good. Now, Bob Arum seems to have a lot of stock and faith in the Maloney twins. So I have to assume that this is obviously one of those fights where it's a test, but he's expecting him to come out on the other side. Maloney's 26-2. The people he's lost to are, the top of the top. So then there's no disgrace in any of that. And I just haven't seen enough of Saul Sanchez. And having looked at the opponents he has faced, he just hasn't faced anyone on that upper level like Maloney has. So for that specific reason, I can't do anything but go a Maloney victory. I'm predicting a unanimous decision because I would assume Sanchez is quite durable. He's young as well, he's about 26. So yeah, I'm gonna go Maloney unanimous decision. Now, outside of that one, we've got Christian Mabili on the card as well, and he is facing Rowan Murdoch, who is another Australian. Is another Australian national. Now, look, the Aussies are extremely tough guys, tough, durable guys. But again, I haven't seen anything of him. I had a quick look at the record. There was no one on there I recognized. But what I do recognize is Christian Billy is a wrecking machine. And Murdoch has been, he was knocked out by Zach Parker. And Zach Parker, who's just about domestic level in the UK, sort of gives me an idea of what sort of trajectory you're on and where you are kind of going. So with that being said, unfortunately, again, I'm going to have to be ignorant here and not know anything about him, but I'm predicting Mabili gets him out of here inside 4 rounds. Maximum, I will say, is 5, but I just can't see it really going longer than that, unless Murdoch decides that he wants to sort of just circle the periphery of the ring and try and stay away from the power. But if he tries to meet fire with fire, I can't see it lasting any more than 4 to 5 rounds at max. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the main event, which is obviously Artur Beterbiev against Callum Smith. Now, there's been a lot of different talk about this fight. I've mentioned this fight on several different platforms over the last week or so. Here's how I ultimately see the fight breaking down, because I don't want to linger this video. So, Callum Smith, if we was talking stylistically, Callum Smith has all the advantages against Artur Beterbiev. He's a taller, rangier guy. He's a classic boxer puncher. Beterbiev is more, some people say he's a pressure fighter. I actually say he's more of a pressuring boxer puncher, because obviously he does box as well. We saw against Joe Smith Jr. he elected to box on the back foot and just made Joe Smith Jr. come forward, chase him, walk him onto counters on 3 separate occasions. Knocked him down 3 times within the space of 2 rounds. And we also saw him against Anthony Yarde, where he was the pressure fighter. He met fire with fire in the center of the ring. We saw him do similar things with Marcus Brown and with Alexander Vosdik, Adam Diniz, and several other opponents that he's faced. So he can do both. He can box on the front foot, he can box on the back foot. There's not it's only sort of the really elite fighters that are special at doing both, can do both, box going forward and box going backwards. Usually people are sort of adept at one or the other, and then sort of have to just tailor little bits of that to the fight. But he's shown that he can do it both ways. The question is how he wants to approach this fight. Now, Callum Smith, ultimately, his best bet is to not box and move, but he has to hold center ring and make Artur Beterbiev have to try and find his way on the inside. Keep him behind that ramrod jab, keep him behind that sort of that nasty lead left hand, and then every time he sort of tries to enter, you've got, switch the angle and pop the straight right behind it, and then follow that up with the left hook. That's obviously the combination that you would want, but you'd want to keep him in front of you at distance where you've got the leverage and he has to find ways in, because every time he has to try and find a way in, that opens up and gives you an opportunity to shoot. And for Beterbiev, obviously, because he is fighting a guy with a much taller and longer range than him, ultimately he then has to he's got to either circle and try to catch Callum coming in, the same as he did with Joe Smith Jr., or if he wants to command enough respect within the fight, he ultimately has to get in and try to sit closer to Callum's chest. He can't be in the mid-range or the long range. Realistically, he's kind of got to stay on the inside, right in his face, stopping Callum from being able to actually leverage any shots of his own, keeping an eye out for that left hook, but then banging away to the body, banging away to the elbows, to the biceps, to the shoulders, to the head, like wherever he can get a beat on, just keep punching and thudding away at them. Unfortunately, for all the evidence I have on Callum Smith, is that he will allow Artur to fight up close. He will allow him to collapse that pocket. He won't maintain that distance and that range to give himself the best opportunities, because for some reason, for someone as tall and as rangy as he is, he doesn't like to fight on the outside that much. It's very much like Sebastian Fundora, hence why Sebastian Fundora ended up getting knocked out by Brian Mendoza, because he just didn't know how to keep and maintain range. Every time he just decided to collapse the pocket to try and brawl and bully on the inside, which ultimately ended up being his downfall. For Callum, now one thing about Callum, he's got a good chin. I guess it's never really been super tested against like the hardest of punchers, but he's also got the long levers where he can tuck his entire arms up and it almost covers the whole length of his body and his head, so he seems to be able to be in that defensive stance. But whenever he's in a defensive position, he has no way to leverage that defense and basically counter off of it. So if Artur can get close enough to the point where Callum then has to tuck up and try to basically stay defensive, he's not going to have the opportunity to shoot any shots off at Artur, and all that's going to happen is, again, the arms are just going to be thudding the sides of the head. He's going to be shooting that short uppercut up the middle. He's going to be, you know, banging to the, you know, sort of to the ribs, to the kidneys, to that midsection, maybe even slightly to the hip, depending on how low or high Smith's shorts are. So while I can see this fight lasting a lot longer than obviously the Joe Smith Jr. fight, I can see it playing out very much like maybe the Smith Jr. fight in sort of the first couple of rounds. Artur just literally there trying to have a look, trying to see how we can end up finding range. But then from about rounds 3-4 onwards, I can see him then being able to figure out how to get inside and collapse that pocket of his own free will and not on Callum Smith's terms, and just start working away, wearing away. And Callum, I think he will try and obviously fight out of those moments, and even in some of those moments he may catch Artur with some, you know, with some good shots. But I feel it's going to be one of those things where, similar to the Anthony Yarde fight, Callum Smith might have some successful moments, but you never truly feel like he's in control of the fight, or that the fight is, you know, being fought and dictated on his terms. And that's what I kind of see when I look at this fight. Yes, that left hook could be a danger, but Callum's never landed, you know, the left hook on any of the elite guys, with the exception of maybe you know, George Groves, who obviously was very faded at that point. But you know, he didn't even land it on John Ryder, who is a very capable world level operator, but is not an elite or even a world class guy. And he had massive problems with him, someone that didn't allow him to dictate the pace. Canelo obviously bullied him around the ring, didn't allow him to dictate the pace, nullified any opportunities that Callum wanted to present. Even though you might say it was only 5 weeks to prepare for the fight, 6 weeks, fair enough, but you still didn't use any of your natural attributes in that fight because you weren't allowed to. And if that's what Canelo does to you, who I don't even think Canelo is as quick as Beterbiev in terms of cutting off the distance and cutting off the ring and getting into position, I just don't see how he does it here. Now, I've always said I think that Callum's the best light heavyweight in Britain, but that is only due to like the British guys. Ultimately, that means nothing on the world scene when there's a Beterbiev and there's a Bivol around, and even a Grozdik, even a Rivera, to be a Popeye Rivera. Like those type of guys, I don't know how well any of the guys over here do with sort of those guys and that caliber. So ultimately, I feel as if this fight basically maybe is competitive / interesting for the first 3 rounds, but after sort of round 3, from round 4, it almost becomes like a bit of a snowball effect, whereby Callum still might have some successes here or there, but he's just fighting and swimming against the tide, and eventually the tide takes over and it's, you know, it's washed out to sea and it's drowned in the ring. And I do see him getting knocked out or TKO stopped around about round 10 or 11, possibly even being dropped on a couple of occasions. I do think he will try and go out on his shield. I feel like if he does get dropped, he's going to kind of try and go for it in the next salvo and then end up getting caught again and then getting stopped. Very similar to how Joe Smith Jr. was. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. But yeah, that's it for this week. Next week I think there's more to talk about, and then on the 27th I know there's several cards, so we can definitely have a much longer video and chat. But with that being said, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and that's Base Picks locked.